Thanks so much for being our guest today.
My pleasure. Pardon me.
Kate Weimer, board certified behavior analyst, myself, we're going to spend a little time picking your brain today because you and I spent a little bit of time together, and in that short period, I had learned a lot. In fact, it was an honor that you had me on your show, so thanks for that.
I appreciate it, Brett. Good to see you, Kate.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so this is interesting. We have a blend of behavioral science here mixing with law enforcement and safety, and you know a lot of that kind of blends together, and they're inextricably linked in many ways, especially in the schools. You know, so Corey is a retired sergeant for the police department in South Jersey. He also owns Safety Man Consulting. And that's a really interesting niche because from what I understand, you've actually taken that a step further than many police departments and brought that to a national level. And I learned a lot about that. It was exciting. He handles things such as very sensitive topics like active shooter response, disaster responses, and many more things. He's also the host of the Corey Jones Show, and that's been very educational in the New Jersey area. He's a master trainer of the Bolo Rap, which I can't wait to get into that a little bit, which is really, yeah. And he's also a media analyst for law enforcement.
Yes.
Did I miss anything there? Because I keep learning more and more. Yeah, quite the expert.
Other than that, a super cool guy, and I surround myself by super cool people.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, it was awesome being on your show and learning about it. And so did you want to expand a little bit about what got you into the field when you were a sergeant here in southern New Jersey for the police department? When did you make that bridge? Was it when you retired, or did you start looking at safety and active shooter response and preventative measures back then when you were sergeant, or did it kind of organically evolve into your consulting group when you retired? How did it all come about?
That's a great question. It's one of the most common questions, Brett. So basically what happened, I have to talk about something that happened unfortunately in America, but we all remember when Columbine happened, which was really the first active shooting that we had in an American school, was Columbine back in 95, I think it was. At that point, we as law enforcement had no answer or had no plan on how we would respond to and handle an active shooter, let alone the school systems. So there was no plan. So I was part of the SWAT team, and SWAT, super cool. It stands for sit, wait, and talk. You know, that's what we do. And that's basically what they did at Columbine. All the cops surrounded the school and handled it like a barricade. And we realized that that was ineffective. So immediately, that very next day, they pulled all of the entire SWAT team and said, you guys got to develop a way for training law enforcement to be able to breach, enter, close with, and stop an active shooter. Now, make it happen. So we put something together, and then we fixed it. We modified it. We got it better, modified it, got it better, modified it, trained it, pressure tested it, right? Went and got other cops on other SWAT teams to play the bad guys who had tactics to really push us to see if they could trip us up. And we did get tripped up quite a bit, you know, but we weren't, our heads weren't too big. So we realized we got to get this right, because little kids' lives, teachers' lives, you know, are hanging on the fact that we're going to get this right. So once we felt comfortable with it, and it's evolved somewhat since then, we then realized that it's fine if we know what to do, but if our partners, mainly initially the schools, if they didn't know what to do, it was useless, because we'd get to a school and they went to school be locked and we wouldn't be able to get in, turn back into sit, wait, and talk again, which is not good. So then we started working with our schools. They embraced it. They were very happy. And then it's just slowly, organically started moving out to different businesses. Houses of worship were the next ones that wanted to jump on, and so forth. So for the beginning part of your question, that's how it evolved into Safety Man. I didn't know that when I retired, I was going to have a business called Safety Man. I didn't know any of these things were going to happen, right? But as it got closer, I started to realize I need some place where I can land. Right, and this is where I chose to land. So I went to the state of New Jersey, formed an LLC, and did that.
Yeah, so it's definitely, as the years go on, I would say, the violence seems to continue. It's in the media quite a bit, so I'm not sure. In your opinion, are the incidents occurring more frequently from what you've seen, or is it just that there's more attention to it from the media? Do you know?
They are. I do believe that they're occurring more frequently, and I do believe that we're paying a lot of attention to them. Unfortunately, they've been politicized, right? So you listen to them,
Yeah.
and depending on what channel you listen to, they'll put some facts out, and a different channel will put some other facts out because they want to get a political spin to it. So, for my ability, what I try to do is listen to 4, 5, 6, or read 4, 5, 6 different accounts from 6. If I get one that's way over here, one that's way over here, one that tends to run it down the middle, right? I try to get all of that because that's the only way I'm able to get all the facts.
Yeah.
And then if something's wrong here and wrong there, I can strip that out. That way, when I go before my potential client, I can speak intelligently and let them know that in 2023, we've had, I think, 116 mass shootings where 2 or more people, not including the shooter, were killed, right? That doesn't mean it was an active shooter in a school or something like that. Could have been a gang shooting. It could have been some other type of shooting or whatever. Not that those are any less important. I'm not trying to minimize
But they're
those.
different.
But they strike a different chord in my heart because it's not 10-year-olds in a school, right?
Yeah.
It's something different, and there's a different way to handle that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what the school part. Since we do school consultation as behavior analysts, just us learning from you, it's something where I'm sure there are times that schools. I was actually just speaking with a school, and I think that they often use their local police departments, right? But from talking with you, there are a couple of things that you do a step further than the local police department. You mind sharing that a little bit, because it's good to hear that you can run deeper with your interventions and your precautions as well as your responses. What might you be doing additional beyond what, say, the local police department might do?
Sure, Brett. So the first thing I do is I find out where the client is, and I actually contact that local police department and the local first responders to find out what their response posture is. Have you trained with the school? Will you train with the school? Can you send an officer, a command level officer, to come out the day that I'm going to be with the school or the client?
From the local police?
Find out from the local police department and or first responders. If I can get a command level police, fire, and EMS, 3 of those people, to come here so we can all echo each other, or they can correct me if something that I want to do is not going to fit in their law, policy, procedure, plan, or training, then I can take that out. And then we can work together to figure out something else that's going to accomplish the same goal, just maybe different.
Do you meet with them initially, or that's something that you guys figure out at the training at the actual school?
I try to meet with them initially and go over the plan that I have. So I'll do it in like 3 pieces. I'll meet with the client, find out what their goals and objectives are. As I like to say, what's keeping you up at night? Like, why am I talking to you? And figure out what that is. Give them a kind of a basic plan of what we're going to do. We start to see a lot of things when we do drills and find out, okay, yeah, that wasn't going to work. Go out this way, make a right, go down those back steps. But then we find out that if somebody pulls a fire alarm, that door gets locked or something. Something happens that we would never have known.
Yeah, a lot of the mechanics are different than
Yes.
what you had expected, and it could really throw a monkey wrench into the process.
I do like what you're saying, though, that it's not a pigeonholed plan. Like, each school does have a different plan. So it's not like you're coming in and just trying to sell the same worksheet over and over and over again. You really do take the time to look into the school system and each police station to see what is conducive for that county or for that school.
Yes. So I care immensely that my clients are better when I leave than when I got there. I care immensely about that. But number 2, I'm not a one motivation type person. I don't believe that people are motivated by just one thing. So I'm also motivated by the fact that I was brought up as a public employee, right, as a police officer. And after about maybe 2014 with cameras and all, we were really worried about whether it be frivolous or actual lawsuits. So my brother being an attorney, every time I make something, let's just mitigate as much liability as possible. Let's just mitigate as much liability as possible. So by doing those things, by reaching out to the first responders, by making sure that this plan fits this building in this type of circumstance, it's going to accomplish that. They're going to get the best plan. They're going to feel comfortable about it because they saw it evolve, right? As opposed to somebody else come in and say, here's a piece of paper from OSHA, just do that.
Yep.
Now, granted, all my base things are from the professionals who made the documents, because the Secret Service and the FBI 2 times did a joint study on mass active shooters.
Okay.
What to look for, what to do, and so forth. So I'll take that, and that's my base document. So then
Okay.
if I'm doing this building and your staff, then we're going to start to break it down and make it specific to you.
Right. And does the federal level, do they get involved at all at the local levels in schools, or is that something that might happen after the fact? Or what involvement, in addition to the basic groundwork that they've been able to provide that you build on, what involvement does the federal government ever have with these types of situations?
They're good once we have our training and stuff put in place, and we have the things that we give our clients what they're supposed to look for, some red flags, some things like that. Sometimes they're working hand in hand with the local, the county, the state, and the federal government. We have what's called the ROC, the Regional Operational Intelligence Center, up in Hamilton, New Jersey. So we can put information up there to staff 24/7, 365, and we can put, like, say we find a note in a room, say I'm going to start killing people, or I'm going to blow up the school, I'm going to release a toxin in the school. Well, we'll take a picture of that note, right? We'll get a handwriting sample. We'll get a deep dive on how many people are supposed to be in the school, who had access to that bathroom between these times. Throw all those names up there. Look for other chatter and stuff in the area. So we have a bunch of people working a bunch of different leads all at the same time. While we'll have the local detectives there, looking through the school, looking through the disciplinary records, who is absent, who's in trouble, who's about to fail, all the different things, other threats and things like that. So we'll do all that together. So the feds will have a big piece in that if we were to do something like that. And heaven forbid there was an event, the feds are going to come down and help with missing persons. If it's out of state people that we got to go talk to, out of jurisdictional people we got to talk to. If there are explosives or firearms, you would have the ATF involved on scene.
A lot of different departments depending on the circumstance, right? Yeah. Yeah. What I was wondering, if we could even dive a little deeper, is would you be able to walk us through some of the steps that you train folks on in schools? Some of the most important steps. I know there's a lot that goes into it, but some of the steps and protocols that you suggest are implemented. And I realize that it's great because you don't have that canned approach. You're customizing so many things for the school. But what are some of the basic guidelines that you're giving schools when you're doing active shooter training, safety training?
Sure. So I like to call it what the client wants to call it, because believe it or not, I've had some clients that say you can't call it active shooter training.
Yeah.
We don't like that phrase. Or you can't say run, hide, fight, because we don't want our people fighting.
It's
So I have to deal with the culture. I have to find out it's the first thing. When I'm on the phone with them the first time, or if I'm face to face with the first time, I talk the way I talk, and I watch their facial expressions. And if I say a word, a phrase, or a concept, and I see them wince, then I realize, okay, that's a touchy subject. So then, depending on what it was, I'll say, earlier when I was talking, I said run, hide, fight, and it seemed to make you upset. Did I misread that, or tell me how you feel about that? And then they'll say, we don't like the word fight. I said, okay. I said, why? And,
Like the school environment.
Culture,
Yeah.
right? And then I have to come to an agreement. All right, what do you want me to call it? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing and have you upset for the rest of the training. So that's the one thing. Figure out what they want, what the culture is there. What's the level of motivation to learn this skill?
Yep.
Right. So that's one of the things I do is if I can't figure out what the motivation is, I have to then go figure out what it is once I get there and I see my clients, my group, their team. I got to find out what's going to motivate them. Is it because you actually care and you don't want you or your friends or these children to get hurt? Are you motivated because they're all going to do it, so I don't want to be the only one not doing it, right? Are you motivated, well, if I don't do something, I might get sued? Okay, whatever it is, I can't change your motivation. I can only identify it and teach to it. So then I find out what the motivation is. Are you just trying to get an insurance, hit and make your insurance go down? You really don't care about it.
Gotcha.
Or is it because something happened 6 blocks down the street and now we think we have it? Whatever.
Right.
I've had all of these at one point or another. It's been something like that.
Gotcha. So the first 2 steps would be understanding the culture and the language to make sure you're pairing with them in a way that they feel comfortable, because each department or each venue that you may train could have a whole different culture, right? So step 1. Step 2 you were saying is basically just getting an idea from the clients in the school, for example, like why you're there, like what's the motive. Sometimes it maybe isn't exactly what you thought it was or what they initially contacted you for. That's awesome, Corey. And then what would you say like step 3 would be in your sequence?
So step 3 would be, let's look at a historic or local history of any type of similar events or any event that caused a large police presence or first responder presence, or heaven forbid, somebody was injured or killed at one of these venues, and what happened with that. So let's see what actually did happen in this area that you may or may not know about. So
Okay.
we can determine what are the types of threats. Because I've gone to clients in inner city Philadelphia, and you step 10 feet out of this brand new built, beautiful charter school, and you're in an area where you're afraid to park your car, right? So they have different challenges than, middle school in Mount Laurel or Marlton would have. You're not going to have that problem.
Yeah.
You have different challenges, right? But you don't have that one. This school had metal detectors and all that. So somebody getting inside the school with a gun, pretty hard.
But once they walk
Problems.
a couple blocks away, they could be in a different situation.
Right, and these people care about their kids, and now we have to have the discussion, which could bring me on to level 4. Step 4 is we determine that historical or local areas of concern. Then we have to determine what is our responsibility as the school when they get off of school property, right? What is our
Yeah.
responsibility?
Where's the line in terms of you looking out for their safety? I guess. Do you know where the school draws the line? Is it on the school grounds that they're responsible, and then once
They
they?
usually have kind of like our property line for your home, where your sidewalk ends right about there. Like that grass, that's typically where it is. So they would have their whole parking lot. Anything that's designated as their parking, like this is only parking for this school. That's going to be something that's theirs. So there's 2 lines. There's a physical line, but then there's that moral line.
Right.
There's that, because if I'm a parent, which I am, and that my kid is just now across the street, but he can see the school, he's talking to somebody who's in the school parking lot, and then something happens, I believe that the school should potentially be involved in that.
Yeah.
Or have a plan for that.
Maybe take
Not
that as-
everybody feels that way, but I believe that. It's, if I can see the problem, it's still my problem.
Yep.
That's the
Yeah.
way I
Just
respond.
because they're
can't
over
just go like
a
this.
foot over a line doesn't mean you're not going to take accountability to help, right?
Good luck with that in the court of public opinion, right?
So I know we talked a little bit earlier, and in behavior analysis, sustainability as well as that treatment integrity piece is so important. So making sure that the plan's being followed to the fullest. I know you come in and provide this training, but then essentially what happens after that training is provided? Is there any follow-up process to make sure a lot of your strategies aren't falling to the wayside?
Most of my clients, I try to have in my contract where I come back once a year and do a drill, like maybe just address them for an hour, things that have changed, reinforce some of the harder things, answer any questions I had, make any modifications that we needed, and then do a drill. We'll do 2 drills, take maybe 20 minutes each, and then I'm out of your hair again. It keeps it fresh in their mind.
So they almost have to pass a test, essentially.
If their command staff wants there to be some sort of actual grade that they have to pass it, then yeah, I can build that in. I can build that. I can build in even a little quiz, what things we look for, or we can do something. You're going out, and they'll get to an exit, and I'll have crime scene tape over saying this exit is no longer available. Find your next exit.
Gotcha.
That's part of the way I train my people.
Yep.
My clients is, you need to find 3 places to hide, 3 places to exit, and 3 improvised or actual weapons everywhere you go, and make it a game. Make it the first 10 times you do it, it's going to be a struggle. But if you don't think of it that way, after about 10 times, it'll start to be automatic. And then you can get other people involved in it, get kids involved in it, get your significant other involved in it, get everybody involved in it.
Yep.
Right. And you make that automatic. And it doesn't take a long time. And people say, Corey, you're crazy. I'm like, I very well may be. But it doesn't mean that this isn't a good idea.
Yeah, and touching back on the training part that you brought up, how do you roll that out and see that there's some competency? One thing in the field of behavior analysis that is sometimes overlooked is that someone could understand the facts, they could reiterate the steps, but they don't always. When it comes to execution of it, they could do it accurately, but they don't do it fluently to a level that would be effective. And in the field of applied behavior analysis, it's one of those things that is often overlooked, but it's a principle to be able to, once you have the accuracy of the steps, then can you do it fluently Can they do it under pressure and things like that? I realize your clients will have different preferences on how they want to practice, if they do practice. But do you ever come across situations where you actually time them, or you're having some time factor involved?
I have a time factor. I have a goal factor. You know, I need you. So we teach run, hide, fight, right? That's the accepted practice of handling an active shooter. We've heard that for probably 10 years. But what does that actually really mean? So the way I teach run, hide, fight is they're not linear. So if you're on fire, what's the 3-word they tell you to do if you're on fire? Stop, drop, and roll, right? Those are linear. You have to do them in that order. Try to do that out of order, and it's not going to work, right? You start to roll before you drop. If you drop before you stop running, you know, now you're going to skid on the ground, and you're not going to have a good solution, right? So I try to teach them run, hide, fight. You could drop anywhere. The situation could put you anywhere just based on its proximity to you. You may say, oh my God, I got to run, or I got to dip in there and hide, and then try to barricade that place if I can. So the testing their competency would be, are they making the right choice? And then while they're in a run, a hide, or fight, they got to be thinking at any point, I might have to change this to one of the other two. So if I'm in a hide, now and this guy comes in, the bad guy, bad girl comes in, I better have a plan of my improviser actual weapons to fight.
And so it's run, hide, fight, right?
Those are the 3 things we do, not in that order. So whatever the situation makes us do, we have to be ready to do that.
So in other words, an example of that being in a different order could be if someone was hiding in a closet, an active shooter came in the classroom, got ready to open that door, it would be wise for the potential victim to go after the perpetrator, right?
Yep.
I know sometimes that we were talking. Sometimes it's some folks see that as controversial. I think you said, why is that? Because it's your last option to save lives, right? I think if I remember you saying sometimes
people are worried about liability. You know, if I teach my staff to fight, am I liable? So, well, if you teach them not to fight and they get killed, hurt, thrown out a window, sexually assaulted or something, but they could have fought and protected themselves, do you think you're liable then? You know, this is not a perfect world. You're going to be liable. People can't wait to see you. This is just the way things work.
Yeah.
So I think once I gently and professionally and on their side, not talking down to them, but I understand. Trust me, I understand. Being a cop for 27 years, half the people didn't like what I did my career anyway. So I'm used to that. I get it. I said, however, my goal is to make sure your people truly understand the gravity of what we're training here. I need them to truly understand it. I don't like sugarcoating it.
Yeah.
Because if I sugarcoat it, then they're going to half-ass it when they're going through the drills. So
Gotcha.
we don't do that. I talk.
I do like something that you said. It's basically like teaching a creative curriculum to be extremely flexible because it's not one steadfast. You have to do X, Y, and Z. How do you program for that within, like, what's the criteria that a staff would have to reach to be able to say, like, you're able to think on your feet in the case that you had to do this in this order, or scratch that and find 3 other things that you can use as a weapon, or whatever that may be. So what would that kind of look like?
So my goal is I try to accomplish these 3 things. A need for the tactic or a need for the training. I get buy-in. So once you can repeat back to me that you are aware of the needs for the training or the tactics or the skill set, then have to just show that you can actually perform the skill set in a non-stressful environment, and then finally show that you can perform the skill set in a mediocre stressful environment. Okay, again, I'm not going to be chasing you around. We're not going to be running and jumping and throwing darts at you. But I might have a Nerf gun, you know, just to throw some Nerf things at you that aren't going to hurt you.
Something that provides a little pressure.
A little bit of stimulus, a little bit of pressure,
Yeah.
right? In front of your friends, so that's a little bit of pressure, right?
Yeah.
Teammates, coworkers.
So you can even make it fun in
Oh,
some,
it's fun.
yeah.
It's always fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. And so there's a lot of good things happen out of that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so just basically, like, how do you teach that flexibility? But like you had said, you're bringing in novel things, whether it be a Nerf gun. No, you may not be chasing them, but like you're putting these things within the environment to kind of simulate what it could be like. Obviously, nothing is going to be the exact way that it would happen. That's impossible.
It is
But the fact that you're bringing in some type of outside stimuli to simulate that was what I was asking.
Yeah. Yeah, that is exactly the way I try to do it. Is again, what building it all, everything, all as we said before. So we're be on like step 5 or 6 now. So every steps 1, 2, 3, 4 have gotten me to here.
Yeah.
They could have driven me in a different area.
Shifting gears just a little bit, what what signs, if any, are typical or I guess best practices to look for when it comes to, say, for example, a student within a school? Part of that, it's interesting because it overlaps. Part of that is our job as behavior analysts. And I realize there also has to be an interdisciplinary team quite often to look for those signs. But from where you sit and your history, what signs historically have you seen, or even when you maybe did a media analysis and looked at the factors, do you see patterns in the behavior of a potential shooter?
Yes. So I don't, but the professionals, the Secret Service and the FBI, through 2 of their studies, really did. And I'm going to give two ways this way. This is what I'm going to tell you, but the clients are actually better at this than I would ever be able to be.
Right.
Because they know their school, they know their clients better than I do. However, what the Secret Service and FBI and all the literature today would say is somebody who's has received or is about to receive discipline, right? Somebody who's got issues at home, their home life, right? Major issues at home, subject to being bullied or not included or really low on the social totem pole, so to speak, within the environment, just doesn't fit in, things like that. Then all the way up to the obvious, making threats, violent, suicidal ideations and things like that. You know,
Yeah.
an abnormal preoccupation with violence, weapons, or anything like that. And then obviously the ultimate, somebody converts to some sort of extremism, whether it be homegrown, foreign terrorist organization, or anything like that.
That's a really comprehensive list.
When somebody does that, and those are just
And you just know that off the top of your head, which means you clearly know you've been doing this a while.
I have it written down here too.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't give away my my secrets.
Yeah.
But the other half of that, Brett, is going to be the client. So they are going to know their students,
Yeah.
right? They're going to know. Now, the superintendent may not know 5th grader or 15-year-old Johnny. However, he shouldn't. If he or she does, that in and of itself could be a flag. Like, why does this person know that one person in a school of 5,000 people?
Yeah.
Right? Or 500 people. Why does he know this person intimately? First, last name, where he lives, all of his teachers. Why is his schedule right there easy to be pulled up on his computer? Because he has a discipline problem. He's he's in danger of failing, chronically not turning in assignments, whatever the thing is. And then they have to be willing. So I encourage them. This is where we go back to motivation. I encourage those staff to intervene, whatever your intervention looks like, whether it be you're in a place and you're going to go, all right, let's talk about this, buddy, to report, document, report up the chain of command to get this person immediate intervention, help, assistance, bring the parents in, whatever we need to do, because our goal is to save this person from hurting themselves or others.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's very interesting because in the field that Kate and I are in schools, and it concerns me when a school jumps to this right away. Often, certain situations, the individual's behavior, say a verbal threat, it sometimes they'll jump to the fact that it could be a manifestation of a disability. So if a learner, say for example, is on the autism spectrum, they have an individual education plan, a behavior plan. They have a history of false threats, empty threats, and it's actually something that's tracked as part of their IEP, and there's actually an intervention that's effective. We find out a lot that there's never been an attempt. There are certain mitigating factors, but we still take it very serious. Do you ever come across situations, and it may not be in schools, but where a person's behavior is not really a threat, but it really is a manifestation of a disability, and it doesn't mean it's not still a threat. But do you come across that? And it may not be in schools. It might be in the streets, and you see an individual's given a direction, and they have what could look like a weapon in their hand, and it may be hard to tell. But not knowing that they may have receptive communication issues in order to, for maybe a typical protocol might be a verbal command by a police officer, and that person might not receptively understand it. Is there any kind of training, or do you approach those situations different? Because you may not know that they can't understand the directions. How do police navigate those sorts of situations?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because there was a time in our career we didn't have that training. And then we had someone on our command staff who unfortunately has a son who's on the autism spectrum. So he took it very seriously to make sure that we got that training, because he lived in town, and, you know, obviously for his own child, but, you know, now he's part of that community and starts to realize, you know, I don't know how old his son was when he was diagnosed, but, you know, you start reading stuff and start finding out about it, and, you know, puzzle pieces on the cars, like, what does that mean? You know, all the different things. So after that, we started getting a lot of training.
Right.
This is going back probably 15 years. We got a lot of training. And now the state of New Jersey has a lot of training that they mandate all officers take. And one of them is CIT, Critical Intervention Training. So that's when someone's in crisis. I'm sorry, Crisis Intervention Training. So when someone's in crisis, regardless of what that crisis is, if it's an acute crisis because something just happened and pushed them out of their ability to cope, or if this is something that is emotional, mental, or any other factor, physical, any other factor that now has them in crisis. They're not coping, they're not managing their emotions or just handling the world very well right now. And here we are, we got to do it. So we're trained in one voice, one question at a time, nice and slow, non-threatening, calm, keep them in a safe place, and have somebody else go see if they can find somebody who's in there, you know, a loved one, a caregiver, a doctor, counselor, somebody that can give us some insight, somebody that this person trusts, and if we can get that person at minimum on a phone, Zoom. Right?
So if there's not the immediate threat, you might be able to pick up the phone and contact a clinician or someone a guardian, to find out their history, and that's good. Now, how about Corey, when it comes to the physical management of a crisis? I know police have certain protocols. If you did know the individual has a developmental disability, maybe a neighbor said, yeah, he doesn't really understand the directions. If it got real violent, and of course you had to intervene physically to prevent him from harming himself or another, do you, when you find out there's a disability, do you use different physical techniques, or the same police protocols that would use with, say, a neurotypical individual? Does it vary at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to do our best to slow it down. I mean, that's what our goal is in everything now.
Yeah.
Since the last 4 or 5 years, is let's just slow it down. Keep ourselves safe. Keep everybody else safe. Don't put ourselves in a situation where if this person now acts, whether they're acting to actually hurt us, they're acting just to get a reaction, or it's a suicide by cop type thing, or anywhere on that spectrum, I got to make it so it's almost impossible for you to accomplish that goal. Right? So I'm not going to be standing in the middle of the street with you.
Right.
If I think that you may be going that. Now, if I know, I've done this before. I've sat down and held hands with adults, you know, in the middle of the street, saying, man, you can trust me, okay? So to your point, how are we going to restrain them if I think that violence is imminent? If I think that I can keep this person calm, but I know that I'm not going to be able to leave this person alone. Like, this person has to go to either screening, crisis intervention, or to the hospital. They have to go. And I know, like, my instincts are telling me they're going to say no, and they're going to resist.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to do everything I can to make it so I don't have to handcuff them and try to do this in the back of a police car, because that's not healthy for them. That's really going to high chance of injury for me and for them.
Yeah.
Well, I got an ambulance. I'll call an ambulance. We can get a certain types of boards.
Yeah. So there might be, in some ways, protective holds that can be done in that don't require the physical human touch that might be a typical.
I mean, we're going to have to touch them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But what we're going to do is we're going to do it in such a way that the ambulance is right there, and we're going to have a Reeves or some kind of board where we use cravats. So yeah, initially we're going to have to, make it a plan where, arm, leg, and control that so the person can't hurt us. We're going to control them, take them down gently, put them in the reeves, and then make a burrito out of them. Basically,
Yeah,
is,
yep.
that flexible stretcher.
Yep.
That way they can't hurt themselves, but they're not fighting against the metal handcuffs. They're not hurting their wrists. They can't tighten them up on themselves.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid there's some other medical emergency. It's much easier for the hospital and or the squad and or medics to be able to treat that person if they go into cardiac arrest or respiratory arrest or panic or something else because now they're confined, they're upside down, whatever. They're not happy. They're freaking out.
And the medical attention's right there. It's really nice, Kate. I think to hear that that's modified for people with disabilities. It's for us. It eases my mind just knowing, having a stepson. I know he wouldn't always understand the direction given to him, and I'd actually have to model it and show him. And but then again, if he was becoming very aggressive, I would have to be hands-on. So that's great.
And I'm sorry if I'm jumping around. I did have a question that I wanted to ask in terms of helping support school systems. So is there anything that you notice when you go into a school system to provide support that would be kind of a quote unquote red flag or a hole within their current plan that you look for before even implementing any type of assistance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I come in, I try to come in like a burglar, right? I want to say, all right, if I'm going to come in and do an active shooter, if I'm going to come in and do a burglar, how would I do it? So usually the client will tell me, all right, when you come in, go this way, they'll buzz you in the gate, or they'll do this and just park over here like that. I'm not going to do that. I'll get there a half hour earlier. I'll drive around, do my own thing, draw, look for things that we want to talk about when we're doing the event. And as I'm doing that, then I'm looking, how important do they take their security? Are there doors propped open? Is there people sneaking smoke breaks outside? 'Cause I don't think anywhere you can smoke next to a school. I don't think you can smoke in a school parking lot anymore, right? So if people are doing that, okay, so all the rules don't matter, right? There's some rules that don't matter to them, right? So those are the things that are red flags. Those are things that are red flags. I had a client that really their initial goal for active shooter training was they really wanted me to be the bad guy to tell them they can't use prop this one door open. That was really all they wanted, because they had been telling their staff over and over again to not prop this door open. Run out to your car and run back to your car. That's really what they wanted. So I was obviously able to expand it from there and incorporate all the things that I needed. But that's really what they wanted, was just that. So what does that tell me? That your staff does not respect you. You told them over and over again to close that door and don't do that, to the point that they're not listening to you. Now you have to pay me to come out and tell them. So if they're not going to follow this rule, all the good rules I give them, you're going to have to change your leadership style.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a huge thing that I see when I'm going into a school, is how serious are they taking just their regular day-to-day? I didn't even bring them this yet. Just their regular day-to-day. How seriously are they taking that?
So at the core, you're looking at their leadership skills
Their leadership
and their
skills.
current, like you said, respect for staff.
When it comes to identifying the red flags, the signs that someone could be at risk, I like that you laid it out. Some of them, like they could have pending discipline coming, social isolation, a lot of those different things. What do you do when you see a lot of signs? Do you recommend the school, or is it the police, that try to identify the validity of a threat by checking if there are weapons at home or that they have access to weapons? That's something that I think school personnel probably are very hesitant to do, because it involves probing into the parent and their family and things like that. What is it recommended? How do you find out if the threat could come to fruition because there are weapons?
Yeah, so it's difficult, as it should be. But if we pregame it, if we talk about it beforehand, it's actually not going to be that difficult.
Right.
So you would contact, depending on where you are, what jurisdiction, the type of school you are, may talk about the types of rules that you have to follow before you can bring that information to a parent, right? You would think, you'd be like, hey, Mrs. Jones, does Corey have any guns? Do you have any guns? But we know that's going to be like, oh.
Yeah.
So we would contact our legal department, right? So whatever the business is, the school is, contact your legal representative. Say, hey, we have 16-year-old, 6-year-old, 6th grade, whatever it is, who we think has suicidal ideations. We want to find out if there are any weapons at home and what's going on at home. But because of the nature of it and the type of information that we might be getting, how do you feel that we should go about this? Should we register letters? Should we knock on the door, phone call, invite the parents in, send the police to the house? Which one do you think is best? All right.
Well, let me ask you, because I'm sorry, to interrupt, but schools often, since it's a little bit of a gray area for them, and there's a hesitancy to make that call to a parent and upset them, there have been throughout various previous shootings, like even that 5-year-old situation. From what I understand about that, that was pretty serious threat. There was a paper trail of concerns. The staff member alerted administration. There was even behavioral data and logs showing how he's attacked people. That sounds to me, and just from the limited media information that I have, it seems to me that may have been an opportunity. I mean, we're obviously being a Monday morning quarterback here, but it seems that at times the school may need to go out on a limb, and it may be upsetting to a family. But if the school district council, their legal department, and the superintendent agree based on a clinician's recommendation about the severity, I wonder what ways there are to really speed up that process. Because if one day goes by and they're pontificating over this, they're checking with legal, and there was a serious threat, and say, for example, the student says, I have a gun at home, or my dad does, there's probably reasonable suspicion and concern. And what ways do you suggest you can kind of prompt along the school district to make it happen? Or do the police go in and look for those
It
things?
could be anybody who's going to go in. So the training that I'm going to bring to the school, we will have already had most of this asked and answered. We will already have had a plan in place. So if this were to manifest, we already kind of have I want to say a blueprint, whatever would be a little bit looser than a blueprint, an outline of how we're going to do this. Okay, we know we need to contact law enforcement. We know we need to contact that anybody who's been around that child, anybody who's had influence on that child from the staff. Right? We need to get all his or her medical records, disciplinary records, grades, absentee, all that stuff. We know we need to do all these things. We know we need to contact our legal department to make sure that we're not
Overstepping
our bounds. But the other question, and this is where I'm coming in, I'm going to say 100%, 100 times, very loudly, very energetically, that where do you want to be on this? Do you want to be the school that didn't do anything because you're afraid, and then tomorrow somebody's shot? Now you're 100% wrong, big. Or do you want to be the school that we erred on the side of caution, we checked our legal, we had law enforcement go out and just ask the parents, and the parents, it's 2023, I can't control their reaction. So we can't worry about their reaction. We have to worry about what's the safest thing for them.
Yeah.
And if we're doing that, I can look at myself in the mirror, because I got to figure out what motivates everybody. I can look at myself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing. I did the best I could do to protect the staff, the school, the teachers, and that individual kid and his family. Or do you want to be the person that says, hey, I just want to make sure we don't get sued. That's all. So what's the best thing so we don't get sued? Because there's going to be people in the food chain that are going to be motivated by one of those different things. So,
which goes back to what you were saying originally. Their motivations could be different. At the end of the day, I guess it's all about the safety of the learners, the students, and those people in that building. Sometimes they're going to have to put away their sensitivity and things like that.
Their sensitivity, their ego, their fear, whatever it is. Your training experience is good enough to handle this.
So
You just gotta do it.
as behavior analysts, we often get presented with situations, and they might be asking us to do a functional behavior assessment, and kind of like what Kate was talking about, the why. So if it is in the IEP that there are random idle threats that have never come to fruition, then we often see a situation where we may have to change the environment a little bit and have some kind of consequence. In other words, it could be for attention, getting attention by,
Staff are getting pulled into like the case study manager's office. Like just have one-on-one time with somebody that they enjoy spending time with.
We see that a lot, not necessarily over violent acts like that, but they often want to get sent down to the principal's office. All of a sudden, there's one-on-one time, like Kate's saying, and
Or to an
attention.
escape some type of academic task that they're doing and they don't want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they'll get sent out of the room and then again go to the office to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and that's where our jobs come in. Where once we're figuring that function, we want to find a replacement. All right, how can they possibly access the principal or that one-on-one teacher time is for appropriate behavior instead of idle threats.
Using functional communication, asking
Yeah.
to take a walk, asking to speak with that person,
Yeah.
saying I need more time or I'd like to do this task later, giving them the communication skills
Choices.
to access the
Yeah.
things that they're looking for rather than making those threats or self-harm.
Yeah.
You know.
And however, when it seems to escalate to something that could actually be a real threat based on previous behavior, violent episodes where someone may have taken an object and tried to use it as a weapon, some of these things kind of escalate it from the behavior analytic view. And what schools are supposed to do is have an interdisciplinary team and often the school psychologist's involvement in order to do a threat assessment. And that's an area that I think I'm seeing more and more folks that are on, say, child study teams not wanting to do threat assessments. I guess it's the liability. And now that a threat assessment has a lot to do with some of the factors that we spoke about. And one of those would be, for example, they might need to temporarily suspend that individual until they can determine the validity of that as a last step. But understanding their previous threats, understanding what access they do have, like we talked about, meeting with the team to determine and interviewing all the people around that student to find out if they had other verbal ideations and so forth. But now, when you enter a situation, for example, that it seems like they're likely to engage in something like this, and it's preventative, and the police are called, you guys come in. Do you ever ask for a threat assessment, or do you ask for, were there formal clinical assessments done by either the child study team or the school personnel? Because I think quite often that's a step that is skipped. And I don't know, as law enforcement and consultants that you are, do you go in and even ask for that? Do you even know to ask for it?
So putting my former law enforcement hat on, yes, we would
Okay.
absolutely ask for that.
Right.
Absolutely ask for that. In my current role, I have not been called into a situation that was in progress.
Okay. Okay.
We'll call that
Yeah.
in progress, right?
Because that's something I would love to bring you in on at times when that occurs. You
Yeah.
know?
So me too, because
Yeah.
again, I'm bringing a different lens to it than
Yeah.
than all the schooling and everything you have is the greatest lens in the world. This is just a different lens, just a little bit of different experience. So you touched on something. You guys have both said something earlier that I wanted to ask because I don't know the answer to this. So say we have this kid who is acting out attention-seeking behavior, trying to get a rise out of people, whatever it is. Is it like a lot of things that people do, that all humans do? It starts to lose its luster. They start to almost desensitize to it, so then they have to get more aggressive, assertive, outlandish in their behavior to the point where none of the things that I'm doing right now are fulfilling me. So now I have to go to run out in the middle of the traffic, punch the teacher,
Yeah. Oh,
get a weapon or something like that. Because
Yeah, that's
these people that are
thinking this.
Yeah, we're excited about this question because, I mean, at least I am, because it's so common that if a learner cannot access what they're going for, or they're kind of adapting to, like you said, the attention, and it's no longer getting a rise, or they're not getting what they
Or
wanted.
the staff are kind of getting the idea of what the function is and they start to extinguish that behavior or not
Yeah.
provide it with whatever it accessed previously. Go ahead.
You have an extinction burst, and that question you just asked is right on point, because you can avoid an extinction burst by finding replacements. So in other words, that individual that is doing it for attention, that possibly wants to keep amping it up, like you're suggesting, you can do different consequence measures to decrease it, but it's not going to decrease it sustainably unless you find other ways for them to access that attention. Because if they're totally ignored, just where you're going with that, they engage in what's called a response class hierarchy. So along with what you're saying, your common sense is speaking right to what occurs from a clinical end. They amp up what's called the topography of their behavior, and it could turn into more severe and severe things until they get what they want. And quite often it's hard to ignore that or to respond, but you can mitigate that and not allow it to get to that point by those replacement behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so one example, because I know there's a lot of jargon thrown in there and like
Oh, yeah.
different types of ideas that you may not be privy to.
Sure.
But you can look at it as you are leaving your job every day and you exit through the same door, right? Usually use your right hand, you push the handle and you leave and you walk out. However, one day you go to leave work and you no longer can exit out of that door, right? So what's the first thing you may do if a door doesn't open that you tried the handle that you always do? What's something else that you may do to try to open the door?
Push it harder.
Push it harder, right? So what? Right. So then you're right, and then if that didn't work, what might you do?
Well, I'm not going to sell myself, so I'll just go to another door. But I'm not going to kick it. I'm not going to.
If that's your only door to leave,
I'm going to try as hard as I can. Depending on how bad I have to get out.
Come on, break a window,
Maybe I'll
man. You
break-
got this. You got it.
you would slowly you would slowly try different things, and your intensity might increase. And it's the same thing with our learners who were taking away something that they normally would get if they just push the door. But if somebody walked up to you and said, "Hey, bud, like you just got to jiggle the handle and the door will work that way," you would be like, "Oh, okay, now I can leave." And the same thing with our
It's the functional equivalent. Like,
Right.
just do this.
So if you give them either, like Brett had said, a functional equivalent or the language or a button to press or a gestural cue or a visual cue or something that allots them what they're looking to get at, then they would no longer need to have that very large behavior or that burst, and they can just say like, "I need time with you," or "Can I take a walk?" or something along those lines.
Almost all of us will go through it at some point when we're used to getting some source of reinforcement. And you know, I often I like to think back of from an evolution standpoint. Some of these extinction bursts are part of our phylogeny. In other words, they're behaviors that have been ingrained in us for years because it's how we survive. So the example sometimes I'll give is just bringing it back. Like if you were stranded on an island and you were there each day, you woke up, you found a coconut tree or something, you climbed it, you pulled down the coconut, you ate it, you found ways to sustain yourself. Now, one day you go over to that side of the island and all of a sudden there aren't any coconuts. So you end up engaging in they call them topographies or different types of behaviors that would escalate. So for that tree, I might first start kicking it, punching it, I might climb it, hang on branches. And then at some point, so that burst in that particular circumstance is what keeps you alive.
Okay.
So sometimes when you think of extinction bursts as I need something, I'm going to go about different ways of getting it. It can be a good thing, but when it turns into, so in other words, the source of reinforcement's no longer there, so you're engaging in other behaviors. So we would learn to forage in other areas of that island for ways to sustain ourselves with food. But that's just kind of an example of how an extinction burst is needed for us to survive at times. And especially, I would imagine, like if you were, I think you even do survival training, right? There are going to be times that people are using the wrong type of extinction burst, and you could probably provide them with multiple steps of how to live through a difficult situation, say in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But someone that doesn't know might go through bursts where they're drinking contaminated water, like I don't care anymore, and then it's actually harmful.
Yeah.
You know.
Don't drink contaminated water. Don't drink your urine.
I guess I better stop doing that.
ABA is ingrained in everything that we're doing. It's just you don't know this fancy term that's slapped on it. Like that's really what it is.
I mean, you with all years of experience, you have the instinct, and sometimes not knowing, even with myself, I'm like I know the instinct of what I need to do, and then I did it, and it was effective. But later I go back, I'm like, the operational definition of what I did in behavior science is this. Now I know why it worked, and it helps me and us as clinicians figure out what to repeat.
Right, right.
Just knowing there are laws behind it, laws of behavior, similar to gravity. It's amazing.
Or anything, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Just knowing that, behavior can ebb and flow, but people do things for four different reasons, or a combination of those four functions. So I think we even talked about that a little bit on your show. It's just fascinating to be able to sit down with someone like you, and I really think maybe a call to action to school districts, if we were speaking to our audience, would be, let's figure out how to keep that dialogue going with law enforcement and combine behavioral science with the practices in the school administration as well as from consultants like yourself. And I'm just grateful, and we're both grateful that you came. And Sweet Tea's back there filming. He's going to cut this thing up and make sure that our audience gets a lot of value out of it.
Where can schools and, like you had said, not just schools, but you do things in the community, where can they find a lot of your content and your support if they're looking to further their knowledge?
Yeah, thank you for that. So anybody can get me at safetyman.co, safetyman, all one word like Superman, safetyman.co, no M. Schools, houses of worship, any kind of business, daycare, anywhere you have a lot of people, I definitely encourage people to come out, give me a call. We'll talk, I'll show up, we'll do, a plan, make a plan, determine your motivation, make a plan, determine the best way to get that plan to everybody, and how to make sure that we can measure its effectiveness and that everybody's adhering to it, and then check it periodically.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great.
And it was awesome spending time with you again. I hope to do this again.
You got it.